You ever give everything you have, your time, your sleep, your whole 20s, to a dream that wasn't even yours? And just when you think you've earned a seat at the table, they pull the whole table away. That's what happened to me. My name's Sloane Wexler. And this isn't just one of those revenge stories. This is the voicemail that ended everything and started something I never saw coming. The call didn't even ring, just a voicemail notification, 2:13 p.m. on a Thursday I'll never forget. I was halfway through reviewing a 17-page pitch deck for a commercial property we were about to close in Miami. The same property I found, I negotiated, I fought to bring into our portfolio. But none of that mattered, apparently, because my father's voice, calm, cold, clinical, said exactly this: "You're out of the family business. Don't call back." That was it. No explanation, no warning, no thanks for the last 8 years. Just an execution wrapped in 8 words. I sat there frozen, phone still in hand, lips parted like maybe a second message would follow. It didn't. My hand hovered over the screen. Then I typed one word back. Understood. No punctuation. Just acceptance. Or maybe shock dressed up as composure. I stared at my laptop screen, the Miami pitch deck still open. And then the company email logged me out, followed by the shared drive, then the finance software. Within 90 seconds, I'd been digitally erased. That evening, my mother texted me. Not even a call, just a line that read, "Hope you understand, this is for the best." For who? Because I didn't understand. I didn't understand how 2 people could watch their daughter spend her entire adult life building a company, their company, and then kick her out like a malfunctioning appliance. I had given everything to Wexler Capital. Every weekend, every late-night client dinner. I didn't go to college parties. I skipped birthdays, weddings, vacations. I even missed my best friend's engagement party because Dad said, "We can't afford for you to be unavailable right now." And I listened. Because I thought loyalty meant something. I wasn't just part of the business. I was the one keeping it from crumbling. When the books didn't balance, they called me. When Ryan, my older brother, screwed up a merger meeting, I cleaned it up. When Dad's off-the-books investment experiments went south, I patched the mess before the SEC smelled smoke. But the moment I questioned his latest scheme, some shady condo deal tied to an ex-politician turned developer, that was the moment I became disloyal. Funny how fast loyalty turns into liability. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I just sat in the dark of my apartment, barely 600 square feet, a place I never had time to decorate, and stared at the blank TV screen, not because I needed distraction, but because I needed silence. Not from the world, from the voice in my head asking, did I really mean nothing to them? By 11 p.m., I opened my laptop again. Not to beg, not to send an email asking why, but to check something. I pulled up a folder I'd started 2 years ago, back when things started feeling off. It was labelled insurance. Inside were copies of documents, deal sheets, transfer records. Not stolen, just saved. Backups. Because when you spend years fixing chaos, you start to document it, just in case. I didn't know what I'd do with it. All I knew was this: I wasn't going to break down for people who didn't think I deserved even a goodbye. They had taken my role, my reputation, even my workspace, but the one thing they hadn't taken, my mind, and what I'd built quietly behind the scenes. That night, I created a second folder. It was called Rebuild, and it was empty. But not for long, because they thought they'd thrown me away. They had no idea what I was about to become. The first Friday after the voicemail felt like waking up after surgery. I knew something had been removed, but the anesthesia hadn't worn off yet. The city outside my bedroom window buzzed like it always did, only now that buzz felt like a party I hadn't been invited to. I stepped over half-unpacked boxes and opened the fridge. Inside, a lonely carton of oat milk that expired yesterday and 2 packs of instant ramen, soy flavour. Nothing says your parents just erased you like dinner in 3 minutes or less. I boiled water on the single burner of my kitchenette. Steam curled up the wall, loosening the cheap paint in bubbles. I thought about the conference room espresso machine back at Wexler Capital. How Dad insisted on the imported Italian one because clients taste respect. Apparently respect was more palatable than a daughter's loyalty. I ate standing up. First bite burned my tongue. I didn't care. Halfway through, my phone chimed, a notification from my banking app. Account alert, unusual activity. My stomach folded in on itself. I swiped, expecting another door slammed in my face. The screen blinked red. Account restricted. Please contact your administrator. Administrator? That was me. Well, it used to be. I spent the next hour on hold with the bank, pacing the 6 steps between my couch and the sink. Finally, a polite voice told me my access had been temporarily limited, pending verification from the primary account holder, Thomas Wexler. Dad, of course. Ma'am, is there anything else I can help you with? The rep asked. I stared at the ramen bowl, now cold and sticky. No, I croaked, then corrected myself. Actually, could you tell me the current balance? She hesitated, checked her script, and said she couldn't disclose that information to secondary parties. Click. Secondary parties. I'd never felt so first-hand and second-rate at the same time. I opened the folder marked Insurance on my laptop, file names scrolling like receipts of every broken promise I'd ever patched. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe proof that I mattered, that my fingerprints were still somewhere on the empire. What I found instead was a spreadsheet I'd forgotten I saved. An equity breakdown Dad sent me 6 months ago, boasting about future succession. Next to my name read 0%. He'd promised I would officially earn shares once we finalized the Miami project. Right, the project I sourced, negotiated, and never saw a dime from. My eyes watered, not from betrayal this time, but from staring too long at spreadsheets under a single bare bulb. I leaned back and pressed my palms to my eyelids. Behind them, memories lined up like dominoes. 10-hour drives to client sites because Dad hated red-eye flights. Mom handing me her heels under the boardroom table because her feet hurt, then taking credit for my cost-saving presentation. Ryan calling at 3 a.m. Sis, can you fix this decimal? Audits tomorrow. Every sacrifice, every invisible stitch holding the Wexler tapestry together, cut with one voicemail. A siren wailed outside my window, Doppler shifting away. I looked at the empty street and thought, is this where people end up when they're useful until they're not? Audience cue. Pause the video right here and tell me, have you ever poured your whole heart into someone else's dream, only to realize they'd locked you out the moment it was convenient? I'm reading every story you drop below because tonight I could use the company. I closed my eyes, exhaled. Then I did something uncharacteristic. I opened a blank document and titled it Rebuild Day 1. It looked ridiculous, like a toddler naming her imaginary kingdom, but the cursor blinked at me, patient and ready. First entry, inventory skills they can't take. List contacts who trust me, not the Wexler name. Find cash flow, even if it starts at 0. Step 1 was easy. Skills, projection analysis, crisis negotiation, forensic bookkeeping, and a photographic memory for fine print. Thanks, Dad. Step 2 took longer. Loyalty in business is as stable as Jenga in an earthquake. By midnight, I had 3 names: Harper Jang, commercial broker, Alejandro Ruiz, construction magnate, and Dahlia Price, venture capital partner, who once whispered, "You're the real brain in that family." Step 3, cash flow, was the killer. My personal savings were in the frozen account. Credit cards? Cancelled. Apparently I'd opened them through the company. Cute. I rifled through a cardboard box labelled college stuff and found a 3-year-old laptop I'd helped Ryan reset for his girlfriend. Inside the lining, taped with blue painter's tape, sat a forgotten USB drive. I plugged it in. Password hint: sister knows best. Ryan's sense of humour aged like milk. I tried my usual cipher and got in. The drive held raw transaction logs, thousands, Ryan's sloppy attempt at reconciling personal transfers. I scrolled, heart pounding. Half the entries flagged S. Wexler, clearing. Clearing what? A chill nipped my spine. Dad's voice echoed, "We keep the family protected." Was that why they cut me out? Not disloyal, just inconveniently informed. Clock read 3:07 a.m. My ramen bowl was still on the counter, congealed. I dumped it, washed the cheap pot, wiped the kitchenette like a crime scene. Something inside me clicked into the same gear I used when crises hit the company: cold, clear, no wasted movement. I copied the USB contents into insurance. I backed the folder to an encrypted cloud. Then I opened Rebuild. Day 1 again, and typed a 4th line. 4. Turn being erased into being invisible until I'm unstoppable. Outside, dawn leaked pale orange over the skyline. For the first time since the voicemail, I felt something brighter than hurt, a thin, buzzing thread of purpose. They hadn't just kicked me out, they'd set me free. And freedom, I was learning, tastes a lot better than cold ramen. By month 2, I'd stopped waiting for a call from them. No, how are you? No, maybe we overreacted. Nothing. Not even a happy birthday. I didn't tell anyone it was my birthday. I bought myself a coffee, sat in the same clothes I wore the day before, and stared out my dusty apartment window like some anonymous extra in a movie about someone else's life. But inside, something else was happening. I wasn't numb anymore. I was studying. During the day, I devoured courses on commercial zoning laws, contract loopholes, and venture capital structuring. At night, I taught myself to code. I didn't have money to hire someone to build my company's site, so I became the developer. Not out of passion, out of necessity, the same way I learnt to scan 80-page contracts in under 2 hours back at Wexler Capital, because if I didn't, no one else would. I started calling people, not people from the family circle. They were too tangled in that web to be trusted. I went to my college email archives and found Harper Jang, a commercial broker I helped once during her messy licensing audit. She remembered. Then I called Dahlia Price, a woman who once called me the real spine of Wexler Capital at a gala, while smiling at my mother and pretending it was a joke. "Wexler's let you go?" she said, like she couldn't believe it. "They did," I replied, "but they didn't take my mind with them." Silence. Then, "You building something, Sloane?" "I am." "Good," she said, "because I've got 3 investors who are sick of dealing with men who think delegation means passing it to their assistant and calling it leadership." And just like that, my first lead. I named the new company Sloane Equity Group. It was barely more than a Google sheet, a domain name, and a folder of contacts. But it was mine. No family crest, no bloodlines, just function. I worked 14-hour days in that apartment. Lights off to save electricity, laptop balanced on an overturned box. I pitched at coffee shops with borrowed blazers. I signed my first client in a diner on the Lower East Side, a small logistics firm looking to sublease industrial space. That deal made me $4,200 in commission. I nearly cried when it hit my PayPal. Not because of the money, though I desperately needed it, but because it was earned entirely outside their name. I wasn't just surviving, I was reprogramming my own worth. By month 6, Sloan Equity had quietly landed 2 more clients and was approaching 6-figure revenue. Nothing huge, but solid, real, and invisible to the people who threw me away. That part felt important. I didn't want them to know. Not yet. The more I built, the more I understood just how deep their control had run. Every email I sent from my old job was monitored. Every deal I led was technically their property. I had no proof of ownership for any success I contributed to, but I had something better now, a paper trail they couldn't touch. I saved every contract, every invoice, every call summary, not to hoard, not even for revenge, just because this time I was keeping score. A year into being invisible, I got a call from a man named Marco D'Alessio, big player in high-end condo development. Wexler Capital had tried to land him 3 times. He always passed. Marco didn't recognize my name at first, but after 10 minutes of talking, he said, "Wait, weren't you the girl who fixed the Penn East zoning disaster? I thought that was Thomas Wexler." "No," I said calmly. "That was me. I just wasn't invited to the press release." He laughed. "Your pitch deck's tighter than anything they've sent. I want to work with you, not them." That deal? It was worth $1.3 million in property consulting fees over 9 months. And the kicker, Marco mentioned offhand, that Wexler Capital had just been denied a loan because a younger firm had already cornered the buyer. That firm was mine. I remember standing in the middle of my kitchen, bare feet on cold tile, microwave humming, and whispering, "They don't even know it's me." For the first time since the voicemail, I smiled. Not a triumphant grin, just a quiet, stunned moment of realizing I hadn't just survived being erased. I'd grown back in a form they couldn't control, and they still hadn't called. That's the thing about being discarded. At first it wrecks you, then one day you wake up and it frees you. It was 11:03 p.m. when my phone lit up. Unknown number, New York area code. I almost didn't answer. My instincts had learned silence was safer. But something in my chest, it wasn't hope, it wasn't fear, it was colder than both. Curiosity, maybe, the kind you feel when you spot smoke on the horizon. I answered, "Sloan?" It was Ryan. I hadn't heard my brother's voice since the day they erased me. He sounded nothing like I remembered. No smugness, no spin, just raw panic. "I know it's late, but I didn't know who else to call. Something's happened." I didn't speak. "They're being audited," he rushed on. "The IRS, they're digging into everything. 7 years back, off-book stuff, wire transfers. They have names, Sloan, your name, on 2 of the offshore accounts." I sat up straight. "Excuse me? I swear, I didn't know your name was on them. Dad, he said it was for protection, like a buffer." Buffer, of course. Use me as the firewall. Again. "Please," Ryan said. "Can you come to the meeting tomorrow? 10 a.m. boardroom. You'll hear everything. Just please." I didn't promise. I just hung up. But I didn't sleep. The next morning, I didn't dress for comfort. I dressed for war, navy suit, clean ponytail, no makeup, not a trace of fragility, just sharp lines and silence. I walked into the same glass building where I once poured coffee and took notes, where I worked 12-hour days cleaning up everyone else's messes. The receptionist glanced up, froze. "Ms. Wexler, are you here to see Mr. Wexler?" "No," I said, sliding a folder across the counter. "I'm here for the meeting." Inside that folder, limited power of attorney, proof of stakeholder status through silent acquisitions, and one clause Dad himself once signed, authorizing immediate access in case of legal crisis. His words, not mine. The boardroom door creaked open as I stepped inside. Every face turned. Dad sat at the head of the table, stiff, jaw locked. Mum sat beside him, eyes lowered to her tea like it held all the answers she refused to say aloud. Ryan stood near the whiteboard, trying not to sweat through his shirt. No one said a word. I walked straight to the chair at the opposite end, the one Dad used to call not for support staff, and sat down. Silence. Ryan cleared his throat. "So, there's been an investigation. Someone filed a report anonymously. They're looking into unreported assets, foreign holdings, the Carter-Lynn deal. I know what they're looking for," I said. "I used to be the one who hid it." Dad flinched. "You still have the files?" he asked. "I have everything," I said. The air conditioner clicked on. That was the only sound. Then Mom spoke. "This isn't the time for grudges, Sloane." I looked straight at her, calm, measured. "I'm not holding a grudge. I'm holding the only thing keeping this company out of federal court." She blinked. Ryan stepped forward. "We need your help," he said. "You know the system better than anyone." "I built the system." I let that hang. Let them taste the bitterness I'd swallowed in silence for years. They needed me now. The same people who kicked me out with a voicemail, who blocked my accounts, who left me eating ramen while they revised the company succession plan without me. Now they wanted my hands back on the controls because they'd crashed the plane I once kept in the air. "You want my help?" I asked. They nodded. "Then I want full access," I said. "No redacted files, no closed books, everything." Dad bristled. "That's unnecessary." "No," I said, voice steady. "What's unnecessary is erasing someone from your company without checking who was holding the walls up." Ryan looked at Dad, then at me. "Deal," he said. They didn't have a choice. As I left the room, Ryan followed. "Mia," I turned. He looked tired, older, humbled, maybe. "Are you doing this to save us or to bury us?" I looked at him for a long moment, then said nothing, because honestly, even I didn't know the answer yet. I got home that night and opened my laptop. Access granted. I clicked into the drive they said didn't exist, and there it was. Millions, moved offshore, flagged entries, clearing accounts, in my name. But here's what they didn't expect. I had already built a better system, and now I had control of both. There's a difference between being forgotten and being erased. Forgotten happens by accident. Erased is intentional. And the moment I opened those restricted folders, I realized I wasn't just kicked out because I questioned a shady condo deal. I was erased because I got too close to the truth. Line by line, the numbers unfolded like bruises you didn't know you had. $9.4 million, diverted through shell companies with names like Branford Consulting and Lux Point Advisors. Multiple wire transfers tied to IP addresses linked back to the Wexler office. And here was the part that made my hands go cold. Most of the accounts weren't under Dad's name. They were under mine. One of the clearing accounts listed my email as the recovery contact, my social security number. There were signed authorizations, faked, but close enough to pass a casual glance. I sat there in the dark, screen glow reflecting off the window like some twisted mirror, and said aloud, "They set me up. Not because I was disloyal, not because I made waves, because I was the easiest one to blame, the quiet one, the workhorse, the daughter who never asked for credit. I was the perfect shield. Suddenly, flashbacks didn't feel like memories. They felt like red flags I'd ignored. Dad pushing me to handle the back end, Mom insisting I never talk directly to our legal team, Ryan laughing when I asked about equity updates. Don't worry, sis, you're already family. Who needs paperwork? Me, apparently. But here's the part they forgot. I don't panic. I document. And years ago, when I still believed in their promises, I'd added a clause into our joint consulting contract, just a tiny one, buried in legalese. It read, should any Wexler party engage in fraudulent or unethical activity using the name, likeness, or information of Sloane Wexler, said party forfeits all claim to her intellectual contributions and company shares. Dad had laughed when I wrote it, called it cute. Mum rolled her eyes. They signed it anyway. Now, that cute clause, it was a legal sledgehammer. It meant that because they used my name to commit fraud, because they risked my future to cover their mistakes, I now had legal grounds to claim full ownership of any structure, asset, or intellectual property I'd contributed to while at Wexler Capital, and I had proof I'd contributed to all of it. The next morning, I met with a lawyer, one who didn't know my last name but respected the paperwork. 3 days later, with signed declarations from 2 former clients and an internal audit from my own startup in hand, I drafted the takeover motion. But I didn't send it yet. Instead, I waited, because I wanted to give them one last chance to admit it, to own what they did to me. I called for a meeting, this time in the same boardroom, but the seat at the head of the table, that would be mine. They arrived just after 10, Dad stiff, Mum overly composed, Ryan silent. I laid out the files, proof of the laundering, the forged accounts, and the clause that would gut the foundation of their empire. And then I said quietly, you didn't kick me out because I was wrong. You kicked me out because I was right, and that scared you. Dad opened his mouth. I raised a hand. Don't. Just don't. Mum leaned forward. We were trying to protect the family. I laughed. Actually laughed. By gambling with your daughter's name and freedom? That's not protection. That's betrayal with a smile. Ryan finally spoke. You're going to take everything, aren't you? I met his eyes. I'm taking back what was already mine. He stood, fists clenched. You'll regret this. I didn't even flinch. I already did. I regretted trusting you. I regretted working myself to the bone for a family that saw me as an extra body, not a person, but I don't regret this. I slid the signed declaration across the table. You have 48 hours to vacate the properties on page 2. Assets listed in section 3 will be absorbed into Sloane Equity Group, legal backing included. No yelling, no gloating, just cold clarity and consequences. They had chosen to erase me, so I rebuilt myself untouchable. That night, I updated the rebuild folder on my desktop. I renamed it Restoration Phase 2. Because this wasn't just about rebuilding anymore. It was about becoming someone they couldn't rewrite again. 48 hours fly by when you're packing cardboard boxes you never planned to touch again. I know because I watched the security feed. Tuesday, 6:17 p.m. My father carrying a banker's box labelled personal. Tuesday, 6:22 p.m. My mother shielding her face behind a silk scarf none of the cameras cared about. Tuesday, 6:45 p.m. Ryan slamming the passenger door of a rented SUV so hard the side mirror rattled. I stood in the mezzanine lounge of that same glass tower, a place I once tiptoed through with coffee in both hands. Now it was mine, and nobody called me the assistant. Nobody called me at all, actually. The phones on the 20th floor were silent, the marble floors echoing under brand new shoes that I bought with my own money, not the family card. At exactly 7:00 p.m, the building manager called. Vacated. Keys in the drop slot. 2 sentences ending a 29-year sentence. A new name on the door. It took a 5-man crew one night to replace every sign that said Wexler Capital with Sloan Equity Group. The next morning, the lobby smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I arrived early, holding a stack of folders for the first all-hands meeting. Some of the staff looked nervous, some looked relieved. Nobody looked vindictive. They were just people who needed to keep paying rent, same as me. "Good morning," I said, sliding into the chair at the head of the long mahogany table. Funny how small that chair felt now. "First order of business, transparency. If you want to know where the money goes, ask. My inbox stays open." A few eyebrows rose, people whispered. I let them. Let rumour circulate around honesty for once. I spent the rest of the week signing things. Termination clauses for the shell companies, compliance letters for the IRS, tax-corrected payroll for employees who'd been shorted holiday bonuses 3 years straight. At night, I slept maybe 4 hours, but it was the heavy, dreamless kind that comes after a marathon, the body trusting that for once the track won't move. The quiet text. The following Sunday, an unfamiliar number lit my screen. "Mom, your father isn't well. Everything is falling apart. We didn't know it would end like this." I stared at the message longer than I should have. The part of me that remembers birthday hugs almost replied. But the part that remembers the voicemail breathed deeper. I deleted the text, not out of spite, out of necessity. You can't build with bricks that still smell like smoke. Table for her. 3 months later, we held the gala. The ballroom at the Metropolitan Plaza gleamed under chandeliers the size of small planets. Some press showed up, mostly local outlets sniffing around for the next self-made woman headline. A few national reporters came because the story, "Daughter disowned, becomes CEO, buys family empire," played well on morning TV. But most of the invitations went to women I'd met in corners of my old life, quiet experts who'd once held entire projects together without credit, receptionists who knew more about due diligence than their bosses, a janitor from my first internship who used to leave motivational quotes on post-it notes inside my cubicle. Dahlia and Harper naturally flanked me on stage like twin pillars. I announced the Table for Her Fund that night, a non-profit funneling 70% of Sloan Equity's first-year profit into seed grants for women forced out of business by nepotism or silent sabotage. And yes, I added into the microphone, hearing my own voice steady and bright, I chose 70% on purpose, because generosity tastes sweeter when it hurts a little. The room exhaled the kind of gasp you feel in your rib cage. Cameras flashed, investors nodded. The champagne tasted less like celebration and more like oxygen. A familiar face in the crowd. I was stepping off stage when I saw him. Ryan leaning against the ballroom exit, thinner than I remembered, suit 2 sizes too big. Security glanced at me for permission. I nodded. Let him come. He shuffled closer, eyes down, no entourage, no bravado. "I'm not here to fight," he said softly. "I just wanted to see what you built." I waited. He rubbed his hands together. "I didn't know Dad put the accounts in your name, I swear." "That's the problem, Ryan," I answered. "You never looked close enough to know." He swallowed. You won." I glanced at the stage. I didn't win. I survived. There's a difference. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to beg. The string quartet started a new song. People drifted toward the dessert bar. I was no longer his sister in this moment. I was the host, the name on the banner. "Take care of yourself," I said, which was true and final. Then I turned away, feeling the weight of 1,000 chandelier crystals splitting light across my back like armor. The last voicemail. Weeks later, while sorting legal files, I found my phone's trash folder. The original voicemail was still there, 41 seconds of cold dismissal. My thumb hovered over delete forever. I listened one last time. Strangely, the words didn't sting now. They sounded small, like a threat whispered through a toy megaphone. I tapped Save to Notes instead of Delete. Not to keep the pain, but to keep the proof. Sometimes being counted out is the best push forward the universe can muster. Morning in the corner office. One sunrise in late autumn, I unlocked the corner office and watched the city stretch in lavender and gold. A delivery truck rumbled below, taxis yawned awake, and the glass tower across the street mirrored my reflection. Hair in a loose knot, blazer draped on a chair, sneakers under a pencil skirt because heels never built an empire, grit did. My desk phone blinked with new calls. Contracts to review, hands reaching across the void for a seat at this bigger, kinder table. I smiled. Not the shy, apologetic curve I grew up with, but a full-toothed smirk that said I belong here. Because I did. I checked the time, 7:32 a.m. Early for most, but right on schedule for someone who used to arrive before the janitor and leave after the night guard. Only now I wasn't clocking invisible overtime to prop up someone else's crown. This crown was paid for, piece by piece, with every tear that hit a cold bowl of ramen and every line of code typed at 3 a.m. to the ones still erased. Before heading to my first meeting, I opened the company's Instagram account, the one Dahlia insisted we start to humanize the brand. I posted a photo of the empty boardroom table with the caption, "They told me I didn't belong at their table, so I built my own, bigger, brighter, open door, pull up a chair, we saved you a seat. Audience interaction, organic prompt." That caption got thousands of comments overnight. Proof that you, the one watching right now, might be carrying your own eviction notice, your own empty seat at someone else's feast. So here's my question to you. If you could build a table big enough for everyone who's ever been shoved aside, who's the very first person you'd invite to sit next to you, and why? Drop their name or their initials or even just a heart emoji in the comments below. Let's turn this comment section into blueprints for bigger tables the world can't ignore. I'll be reading every single story because, trust me, I know exactly how it feels to eat alone